Priya Bala-Miller, and I'm a second-year PhD student at the University of British Columbia. I'm affiliated with the Department of Political Science there, as well as the Liu Institute for Global Issues. And in addition to that, I'm a research associate at the Carleton Centre for Community Innovation at Carleton. So theoretically, my work has three strands. First, I'm really interested in the phenomenon of issue emergence, and within the context of shareholder engagement, to really understand which issues are captured on the shareholder advocacy agenda and which issues aren't. So for instance, we obviously within the investment community, we see a huge interest in engaging on the issue of conflict minerals, particularly those originating from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, but we don't see a similar interest in, for instance, conflict jade from Burma. So I'm really interested in a theoretical explanation for why we see that kind of variation. So I'm really interested in examining the place of institutional investors in affecting conflict dynamics, because this is one area particularly where business exposure to human rights risk is extreme. It's quite magnified. But at the same time, I think what's been clear from the global governance discourse on this is that accountability mechanisms to hold companies to account for human rights abuses and their complicity in human rights abuses in this context is quite vague, or those mechanisms simply don't exist. And in this kind of climate, institutional investors have a particularly unique role to play and a particularly helpful role to play in mediating the role of business in relation to human rights. And I think what's also interesting from a spatial and a geographic perspective is that there are increasingly equities investments in emerging markets, and there's also a surprising overlap between emerging markets and countries that are experiencing significant degrees of social conflict. Now that might not be overt armed conflict or civil conflict, but still sort of some form of social conflict. And so understanding what role capital plays in those kinds of conflict dynamics, and particularly how institutional investors can work towards better human rights compliance on the part of companies, I think is an under-researched area, particularly in terms of concerns of ESG integration. So the social pillar, as we all know, is somewhat neglected. And so in the long term, I really hope that my research program will speak to that gap.